Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's special IFA webinar. Thank you for joining us. My name is Mike Lehman, and I'm Vice President of Federal Government Relations at IFA. Happy New Year, and we hope you and yours are staying well and healthy and wealthy if possible. But welcome today to the PPP Primer and Presidential Preview Program. And over the next hour, we really have a great program. It's a two-part webinar. The first 30 minutes, we will tell you what you need to know about the newest round of the Paycheck Protection Program that's just been made available to many franchise businesses. And in the second half hour, we will share with you what franchise businesses can expect in 2021 from state legislatures and the new administration in Washington just one day after they were seated. The Biden administration was seated yesterday. So we're going to look back first and then look forward in the two parts of today's program. I should note that a recording of today's program will be posted later today on IFA's community website. That's community.franchise.org, community.franchise.org. And we also encourage you to enter your questions into the question function on your screen. We will have two brief Q&A times in the program after each of our speakers present. So we would love to get to as many of your questions as we can. All right, it is now my pleasure to introduce our first expert guest speaker, Mr. Brock Blake. Brock is the CEO and founder of Lendio, the largest online marketplace of small business loans in the US, and a great IFA member. You can visit lendio.com for more information. We do thank Lendio for their special support of today's program. And at this point, it is my pleasure to turn the first part of our program over to Brock Blake. Thank you, Brock, and welcome to the program.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate you having me. I'm just going to make sure that my screen is sharing appropriately. Can everyone see my my slide deck? Michael, are we good? Just want to make we have confirmation here, hopefully.
I can't see it yet, so we may need to pull it and run it ourselves, Brock.
All righty.
There we go.
Okay, so I'm not controlling it. We got someone else controlling it, I guess. Okay, yes. Sounds good. Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to be here with everyone, and especially all of you entrepreneurs and small business owners across America. We are passionate at Lendio about helping small businesses. Lendio is the largest marketplace in the US for small business loans. And what that means is that we have over 300 lenders, and we to help small businesses get access to capital. So you come to Lendio, you fill out one application, and we take that application. We use a matching algorithm to determine which lenders are the best fit. We submit your application to those lenders. They'll underwrite it and then send back to us an offer or a decline. And we we gather those offers or declines and present them to the business owner in a way they can comparison shop the rate, the term, the payment around, and all the information, so that the business owner can get the loan that they need. We work with many banks, credit unions, fintech lenders. Our mission at Lendio is fueling the American dream, meaning that so many small businesses out there that need access to capital, and our goal is to simplify that for that business. And that's across every loan product: lines of credit, term loans, equipment loans, SBA loans, and of course, PPP loans. And we've helped over 250,000 small businesses across the United States secure capital, and for more than $10 billion of loans. A couple of years ago, we launched a franchise model we call Lendio Local, and it's the first of its kind franchising program for entrepreneurs across the United States. We now have over 80 territories, and those Lendio Local representatives are basically working with business owners in their local community and identifying which one of them needs help, and then leveraging our technology and our customer experience to be able to find them the right lender that they need to get their loan. They work with accountants and attorneys and chambers of commerce and BNI groups and others in their local community, and are really the face of Lendio in that community to help small businesses. And our Lendio local team in the last round of PPP helped over 7,000 business owners get $425 million of PPP loans last year. And they're, of course, actively participating in this round of the program that was just launched a few days ago. We can go next slide, please. So today we're talking all about PPP basics, and the first thing I'm most excited about is that after months of back and forth with Congress around, whether they should pass another stimulus package, finally they came to an agreement and passed the bill, and which included another round of the Paycheck Protection Program. And the reason why I'm so excited about that is because we hear from small business owners every single day about the pain that they're going through. In so many areas, they have significant restrictions placed upon them that have hurt their business, that have decreased revenues, and to no fault of their own, it's having a significant impact on their business. So the PPP program is critical to help business owners keep their doors open and get the capital they need to make payroll and stay alive during what I am calling this dark winter until we get to the vaccine. So a few things that you need to be aware of when we're talking about the Paycheck Protection Program. Obviously, Congress has set aside over $285 billion. $12 billion has been set aside for minority-owned businesses and live event companies. So those that are like theaters or comedy shows or sometimes event houses, wedding locales have money set aside for special grants. And we're not going to talk a lot about those special grants, but if you meet one of those criteria, you should definitely consider the grants that are available for those types of industries. For the rest of businesses, they have access to 2.5 times their average monthly payroll, except for a few industries that have been hit the hardest. And those are, they start with an NAICS code of 72. Those are the restaurants, hotels, theater, movie theaters, and some of those others, bars, that they get access to 3.5 times their average monthly payroll. And the great news is for those business owners that already secured a first PPP loan last year in 2020 are eligible to receive a second PPP loan. The eligibility requirement that you must meet, though, is that you need to show a 25% reduction in revenue from 2019 to 2020. So that could be Q1 2019 compared to Q1 2020, or Q3 2019 versus Q3 2020. But on a quarterly basis or on an annual basis, you need to be able to show a minimum of a 25% revenue reduction. For those that didn't get a PPP loan last year, you're eligible basically under the same guidelines that we had in place last year. And we'll walk through the details on that. And basically the program is available until the end of March. So let's go next slide. Who qualifies for this loan? So first of all, you have to have been in business at last year at this time, prior to February 15th, 2020. If you started the business after that, you will not be eligible. And for the first draw, you cannot have more than 500 employees. For those that are looking for a second draw, you have to have used your first PPP loan because the intent was to get the loan and use it for payroll. You have to have less than 300 employees, and as I mentioned, showing a 25% reduction in gross revenue. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Those that some of the common disqualifiers that we're seeing. So if your business was not operational before February 15th, unfortunately you're ineligible. If you only employ household employees, you're not eligible. If one owner that is 20% or more of the business has been incarcerated on parole or has been convicted of a felony within the last 12 months, you would be ineligible. If you've been delinquent or defaulted on an Sba loan in the last 7 years, or if your business is bankrupt or going through bankrupt proceedings, or you do a business in an industry not eligible for Sba 7A loans. Now, if your business wasn't open, one important clarification, if your business was open February 15th of last year, and you've since your doors are closed, you haven't gone bankrupt, but you're not necessarily open, you are eligible to be able to get a PPP loan and open your doors back up. As long as you haven't gone through any bankruptcy proceedings or other things like that, and you have the proper documentation, you should be able to qualify for a PPP loan. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. One of the most important things that you have to be aware of is the required documentation needed for loans. This is one of the things, I just looked at a report this morning of files that we've been working with that have been rejected on our initial review. And 81% of the files that have been rejected were rejected because they didn't have the proper documentation. And we're retooling a few things on our front end app to be a lot more specific around which docs are required. So this, if you are applying for a loan, this is critical for you to know. You have to have a fully completed and signed PPP application. You must produce a 2019 federal tax return and any payroll documents that are supported by the tax return. So this would be your a tax return of 940, 941, 943, 944, 1120, 1040 Schedule C, depending on what entity type. And I don't have enough time today to go through each entity type and the documents that are required. But your tax return that shows your wages is going to be your most critical doc that you're providing. You also need to show a document that shows proof of existence on or around February 15th. So for a sole proprietor, or self-employed, or a single employee business, that would mean a January or February bank statement. For anyone else that has employees, that would be a payroll statement covering that time period, showing the employees that you had at that time frame. You need a color copy of front and back of each owner's government identification, so that's driver's license or passport. You need a voided check, and ideally, a Secretary of State snippet would be helpful, showing proof of ownership, connecting the business person, the name of the individual to the actual business entity. Okay, that's for first draw loans. Let's go to second draw loans. Second draw loans, businesses can receive, as I mentioned, 2.5, except for those in industry that start in 72, they can receive up to 3.5 times their average monthly payroll. The maximum loan amount on a second draw is $2 million. On the first draw, it was $10 million, but this time it's $2 million, and the combined max between the first and the second can only be $10 million. One important question that always comes up is, do we need to use the same lender the second time around as we did the first time around? And the answer is no. If you would prefer to choose a different lender, then you are able to do so. Going into the application process, I would get a hold of your SBA PLP number, the payroll documentation that we provided, and then that I already mentioned. And then you need to be able to show revenue reduction documentation. At Lendio, what we're doing is asking for your financial statements. You can upload those, or you can input them on our form by quarter, your revenue and expenses by quarter, and then we will help you produce a financial statement. You just need to make sure that that information is 100% accurate and could pass an audit if that, because these loans could be audited in the future. For loans less than $150,000, the borrower may not be required to provide documentation on their revenue upfront with the application, but it will be required to have the loan forgiven. So most lenders that we know are asking for the revenue reduction documentation upfront, so they can simplify the forgiveness for you on the back end. Okay, next slide. One of the things that is different is that there's multiple, this time around, they've made it easier for owners that have multiple locations. So businesses with multiple locations can receive a PPP loan for each individual location. But we'll need proper owner identification for every owner that has 20% or more, including the information that's provided there: name, address, email address, social security, ID, and whatnot. But if you have multiple locations of restaurants or other warehouses or other things like that, retail shops, each individual location can get their own paycheck protection loan. Okay, a couple more slides, and then we'll open it up to questions. And I've got this sun coming right into my eyes. I'm trying to dodge it. So what happens after you apply? So let me just tell you about Lendio. And listen, what's most important to us is that you get the loan that you need, wherever that is. If you have a relationship with your local lender or local bank, great. Then go there. At Lendio, we are a marketplace, and we have many lenders that we work with that offer paycheck protection loans. So as a marketplace, what's different about us is that we're gathering your application and then figuring out which lenders are processing the loans most efficiently, and then routing that customer to the lender that is the most efficient, giving hopefully you the best chance to get the loan that you need in the most efficient time frame possible. So what we do is we verify the application is complete, and we send the application to the trusted lender. Once they do another review to make of the documents and the calculations, the application will be submitted to the SBA. The SBA makes an initial decision, which will result in one of four things. Number one, it could be straight approved, and you get a PLP number. And this indicates that funds are reserved for you, basically pulls aside some of the $285 billion allocation and sets it aside for you. So I'll come back to that in a second. The SBA may require more information or documentation based on the submission. And if your first draw loan is currently under review by the SBA, there's all kinds of different reviews that they're doing on the 5.2 million loans. They could reject the application until they finish reviewing your first draw, and ultimately they could just reject your application. They're going through fraud checks, they're going through identity checks, they're going through a bunch of different lists on the SBA, and so there could be some that don't meet the criteria outlined by the SBA. Once you receive a PLP, so your loan number is approved, then there is a process of another additional fraud check, and then it goes to contracting, where they submit the application. They'll submit the DocuSign to you for signature. Once they validate that the voided check is there, they've got the closing contracts, it's passed all the fraud checks, then they have 10 days, calendar days, to be able to complete underwriting and disperse the funds. Last slide, and then we'll open it up to questions. My urge is to be able to just be patient. we've been on the phone with our representatives at the SBA. In fact, next week we're going to do a webinar with the head of the SBA who's running all of PPP. And his strong guidance, because he knows I've been talking to press on CNBC or CNN or other things like that, was communicate that we do not believe that the money will run out in the pace which it did last time. Last time in about a week or 2 weeks, it was gone. But this time they expect that these loan funds will last much longer because the loan sizes are reduced, the revenue reduction criteria is there and whatnot. So they expect the loan to last maybe until the end of the program, March 31st. And some of the stats to be able to back that up. After 1 week, there have been 60,000 loans approved for $5 billion. And that sounds like a lot, but that's only 1.5% of the volume that was approved in the first round, and only 1.7% of the total allocation. So if it's only going at 2% a week or whatever, that's 50 weeks that it could be open without running out. So my point is now it will probably speed up. There's been a lot of hurdles and bottlenecks and things that happen at the beginning as you're learning a new process. But we do anticipate that it won't be the mad rush that there was last time. The two largest lenders from the last round that did hundreds of thousands of loans and were Wells Fargo and Bank of America. And we just saw this morning that Bank of America only has 30,000 applications for $2.5 billion, and Wells Fargo only has 29,000 applications for $1.67 billion. So those are comparatively much smaller numbers. Every lender, each application requires manual review of all the docs. They have to go through each document, checking for ID. Does the ID match the tax return? Are there signatures on each of the tax returns? Does the payroll statement match the tax return statement? And there's just a lot of can you imagine every file, and there's thousands of files going through that. And then if it doesn't pass, sending that file back to the borrower, asking them to resubmit the information, and then going through that review again. And so, my encouragement is that, that you for sure, if you meet the criteria, you definitely should apply. But also, and we appreciate and understand that there's urgency, that your business, you need the capital as quickly as possible. And everyone is trying to move with the new guidelines that have been rolled out as quickly as possible. But just hopefully you can have a little bit of patience going into the process. The more thorough your application is, the faster it will go. So with that, I'd love to open it up for any questions that might exist. And I've got a few minutes, and then we'll turn it over to some of the other presenters.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brock. Awesome information. We do have a handful of questions we'd love to pose to you. And for those of you who've put in questions, if you don't get a response, IFA will follow up with you after the program and get you an answer. But we can spend 5 to 10 minutes here with Brock. So first question, and most of these are eligibility questions, but the first one is, I have multiple businesses. Can I get loans for all of them?
Yep. If each of them meet the criteria that I outlined, and you have multiple businesses, you can get a PPP loan for each individual entity that you have ownership in. Yes.
Great. Okay. So here's a scenario that is posed. Our company got a PPP loan in round 1. So they're talking about a second draw loan. We do not have a 25% revenue drop in our traditional calendar quarter, but do have drops in 2 different 3-month periods that are not traditional calendar quarters. Are we eligible?
The guidelines provided by the SBA are specific to calendar quarters or full annual. That's a very unique scenario. During those 3 months, there's just one exception I'm thinking through, is that they will allow seasonal businesses to take a 12-week period. and use that as their calculations. I don't know if they will allow, I know they'll allow it on the payroll side. I'm not sure if they allow that on the revenue reduction criteria. So there's guidance provided by the SBA, and I'd have to talk to my team to see if they've come across that scenario. My initial inclination is it's probably doesn't meet the criteria, but it seems like there would be a lot of businesses that meet that same standard, and the SBA might reconsider that and say over a 12-week period versus a calendar quarter. So I feel for you. I don't know if that will pass, though, according to the guidelines presented that have been published up until now.
Okay. Yep. Thank you. Next question. I have a franchisee that opened in June 2020. Is there a loan or grant for this franchisee? It's a woman-owned business, so PPP, EIDL, any other SBA programs that might be relevant there?
Yeah, so if it meets the live venue grant, that could be one, or the EIDL loan grant is another one that you could be eligible. I do not believe that the EIDL grant or the EIDL loan has the requirement that you had to have been in business prior to February 15th. The EIDL grant allows you to get $1,000 per employee that you have, up to $10,000, and it's a true grant, doesn't have to be paid back or anything like that. And the EIDL loan and the SBA, the new SBA guidelines around SBA loans are also very attractive. SBA loans allows you to basically have 6 months of payments that are forgiven, that have lower fees, they have lower rates, they have a higher guarantee. So we didn't get to talk a lot about the SBA products, but the SBA loan options, like the SBA 7A Express loan, could be a really good option if one of those other grant options don't work for you.
Great. A couple forgiveness questions now. First one, how do the forgiveness rules for PPP2 compare with the PPP1 forgiveness rules?
So they've simplified the forgiveness application pretty significantly, especially for loans less than 150,000. It's a one-page document that you have to be able to submit and validate. That just came out a few days ago. And the forgiveness rules on both the first and the second, I believe, are the exact same. And so if you haven't gone through your PPP1 first draw forgiveness, I think all those guidelines are now published and made available. You should be able to talk to your lender about that. And the PPP2, the forgiveness, I guess we didn't talk about forgiveness guidelines, meaning that you have to use the money. This is an important part that I probably should have covered. You have to use the loan for it to be forgiven on either payroll, rent or mortgage expenses, utilities, or any that they've added a couple new clarifications in there, which I love. They are allowing you to use the money on any things that to meet the safety guidelines that have been put upon you by cities or states, or if you need plexiglass or you need to wear PPE equipment for COVID, or if you need a certain technology or software to keep your business open. They created a new category for that as well, which didn't exist. So like if you run your business on Stripe or something like that, any software that is a requirement to keep your doors open, they'll allow you to use those expenses, and those will be forgiven, which I think was a great expansion.
Great points. Thank you. Let's do two more. Do you need to have your first PPP loan forgiven in order to apply and receive PPP loan number 2?
No, it doesn't have to be forgiven. You just have to have used the capital, but it doesn't have to be forgiven.
Great. Last one, and like I say, we will follow up with everyone else. This question is about, I understand some states are passing legislation that goes against the federal PPP deductibility rules. Are you aware of this, and what does that mean for borrowers in those states as we head towards tax time?
I've heard about these things. I'm not deeply aware of them. The best recommendation I would do is get, proper tax advice on the deductions and that. I'm sure local accountants and tax professionals will be able to answer those questions in those local geographies.
Great. Yep. And IFA is also all over those state developments as well, and that's going to be a pain. One more, if you'll indulge us, Brock. How long does the SBA take to process the application once it's submitted by a lender?
Well, there's a couple stages of the process, which is the first is the lender review that meets all the the guidelines, criteria, and it does the payroll calculation. Depending on the volume of applications and the resources they have, my guess is that's probably a week to 2 weeks for the lender to go through each one of those, and maybe some back and forth with the business owner. Then it gets submit to the SBA, and the SBA is turning files around in 24 to 48 hours. So that's then 1 or 2 days. And then from there, it's got to go through the fraud checks and the contracting. And that's probably another, they have 10 days from after they've done their fraud checks to fund. So that one's probably another week to 2 weeks. So it's not going to happen overnight. It's and again, the thing that will accelerate that is making sure your application is very thorough. And once you get your PLP number, that does mean that your loan is reserved for you, and hopefully it will give you a little bit of peace of mind as you're waiting for it to actually hit your account.
Awesome information, Brock. We'll let you go now, but thank you so much again to you and the whole team at Lendio for this program, and just thanks so much for all your help.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. Best of luck to all the business owners out there getting through these difficult times.
Amen to that. Thank you, Brock. And now we turn to our second group of expert speakers. I want to welcome in our other two friends. So we have Michael Latito, who chairs the Workplace Policy Institute at Littler Mendelsohn. He is an expert on all aspects of traditional labor relations and serves as IFA's labor counsel. And then we are also very happy to welcome Ashley Palmer, who is a partner at Peck, Madigan Jones. She is a veteran of both the Obama administration and U.S. House Democratic leadership, and she is very well versed in the issues ahead of us in 2021. So welcome to both Ashley and Michael. And let's start with, let's go ladies first here and start with Ashley. So Ashley, we all made it through 2020. God bless America. So we're here in 2021. The pandemic is still going, but how does 2021 look in Washington?
Well, I think and thank you, Michael. What an easy question, right? Well, we all got through yesterday, right, with the inauguration. That went smoothly. I hope the rest of 2021 will go as smoothly. I think the Biden administration at a high level is going to focus on ending the pandemic, climate change, economic recovery, and also racial equity and justice issues. And I think every facet, every agency will deal with those overall issues. Obviously, COVID is the most pressing issue that we have to deal with now. President Biden has put out like a high level fact sheet on his COVID plan that he's also going to be talking about later on today. So hopefully we'll get more details that way. But I think we're, focusing on a national strategy. And for y'all, I think reopening schools, businesses, and travel is the biggest thing, right? So getting businesses open, getting businesses the guidelines they need to open safely and to keep their workers safe. I think that's probably the biggest priority that we're dealing with now. We have a timeline up on the screen now. Obviously, we had inauguration day yesterday, but we have a lot of things that are going to be expiring and that Congress is going to have to deal with. So March 14th, enhanced unemployment benefit expires. March 31st, PPP program expires, which Brock was just telling us about. I mean, that's something that we're going to have to deal with quickly. I don't know what is, I think, and they're trying to figure out, both Congress and the administration, what the specific plan is now. How, if we do a small, if they do a small COVID bill, if they do something big in budget reconciliation, that's what they're working through now. Going back to Congress, you know, the House, we're still in the majority. The Senate, we now have the majority. And then obviously we have the administration as well, but our, you know, the ratios are slim, which makes things hard for the Democrat. Yes, it's great, and they'll be able to pass thing. And I go back in my Hill staffer mind, so, which is why I keep saying we, but they'll be able to pass a lot of things, but it's going to be hard to do sweeping, you know, uber progressive items that, you know, are some of the progressive members had wanted to do. And there's still one race they haven't called in New York. So, but our margin is very slim in the House. So the Speaker Pelosi is going to have to make both our moderates and our progressives happy, which, you know, as the former floor director for the whip, it's very tough, and it's going to be much tougher now. And, you know, President Biden has also said he wants to work with Republicans. He wants to do things in a bipartisan way. I think, you know, we saw several executive actions that he introduced yesterday, and I think you'll see a lot of that the first 100 days. But I think, you know, this Congress, the next 2 years, he's going to want to do things in a bipartisan matter as much as possible. Obviously, I am happy that we won both the Georgia Senate seats. But again, the margin is super small. It's going to be tough. And, you know, right now, yes, Mr. Schumer is now the majority leader in the Senate. However, they do not have a sharing agreement yet. So the chairs are still the Republican members. So we still have a ways to go. I'm hopeful that we can get a lot done, but it's going to be it's going to be a rough 2 years.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Ashley. Some tight margins in 2 houses of Congress for sure. So let's welcome in Michael Latito here. Michael, within this picture that Ashley has painted, what issues in Washington should franchise business owners particularly keep their eyes on, you think?
Hi, Mike. Hi, Ashley. Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me. There's a number of things. In the COVID relief bill, there are different provisions that can directly impact franchises. For example, there's an increase to the minimum wage of $15 for those in the restaurant industry in particular, and hospitality more generally, the elimination of the tip credit. It remains to be seen whether or not those 2 provisions will continue to stay in the package as it proceeds. And Ashley is quite correct that it's got to be done by the middle of March, no later, because of the unemployment issue. There's an additional kicker on unemployment of $400, and that gets extended until September. That is a lot of relief for a lot of businesses out there that have had to lay off many of their people and are very concerned about them. And it's also, you know, on the other side, a way of generating money that's going into people's hands that are going to be spent on goods and services that businesses are providing. So it works both ways. On the other hand, there's a paid leave provision in the bill. And this paid leave provision is somewhat familiar to many people because it was in the CARES Act. Only this time, the more than 500 provision that excluded those businesses from participating are now included. And the less than 50 are also included, including healthcare people. So everybody's included. There was a lot of concerns as to the interplay between the additional unemployment and the paid leave provision the last time around, because a lot of people were able to actually be making more money by staying at home with the unemployment as opposed to taking the paid leave. So how this is going to play out with the ongoing negotiations, as Ashley so correctly said, with these extremely tight margins, it remains to be seen, and hopefully they'll come to some sort of a true bipartisan solution. I think that the minimum wage, as I said, is going to get carved out of the COVID bill, but I think it's going to become a separate bill. I think the Raise the Wage Act of the 15 is going to be front and center. I think that there's going to be a real issue as to whether or not you want to take businesses that are back on their heels, some of which are on their backsides, and then say, come on back, get those businesses open. And by the way, we're going to have a substantial increase with your minimum wage. You know, for some companies that are operating in places like California, an increase in the minimum wage to $15 is not that significant an issue because they're already dealing with those kinds of concerns. But if you're in Alabama or Louisiana, it does become a very significant issue. So that's something to definitely watch. And obviously, the elimination of the tip credit for restaurateurs and hospitality is a big deal. Franchising spent a lot of time and effort on the joint employer issue over the last 4 years with a great deal of success. The interplay between the franchisor and the franchisee is obviously extraordinarily important, especially for the small franchisee business people who tend to be mom and pops who don't have access to individuals like Ashley or myself are out there trying to figure it out for themselves, are looking to the franchisor for support. The franchisor is concerned about giving it because of the possibility of a joint employer claim. We certainly saw that play out against one major company with a trial before the NLRB that was the longest trial in the history of the NLRB since 1935. So there are some problems there, and you know the joint employer issue that was promulgated, the rule that was promulgated by the Department of Labor has been enjoined. We've intervened on behalf of the IFA and others, and the briefs were filed last week, and that appeal is now in the Second Circuit. That's something to watch. I suspect that the current administration is going to try to stay that, and that will be a litigation dispute that will be resolved over time. The IC issue, the independent contractor, there's another rule that goes into effect on March 8th. I anticipate a litigation battle as well as a APA battle with respect to that rule going forward. And then you have, you know, the biggest one of them all, the PRO Act. The PRO Act changes the National Labor Relations Act in 51 different ways. It's the most substantial change to our labor laws since the National Labor Relations Act was passed in 1935. The president has voiced a great deal of support for the PRO Act. As a matter of fact, he's gone beyond that by suggesting that corporate officials should be held personally liable. So is the PRO Act going to pass in its current form? Are they going to break it up? Are they going to put parts of it in different riders and other pieces of legislation? Is it not going to go anywhere at all other than perhaps hearings in the House and the Senate with a great deal of messaging around it? That all remains to be seen. But these are significant issues, and for anybody with government contracts, I'd be particularly concerned about that because the executive orders that we anticipate Mr. Biden would issue may very well embroil them in some of these issues, such as the old blacklisting rule, which is what we're hearing. And don't forget that the COVID bill also talks about asking OSHA to consider an emergency temporary standard. So we'll be looking to that, and hopefully it's not going to follow, assuming they go that route, the kind of standard that we have in California, which, while it may have been issued in good faith, is totally impossible to comply with.
Excellent overview, both of you. So a lot of issues. Sounds like we're going to need our friends on the Hill as much as ever. So Ashley, back to you. A lot of new members on the Hill coming in with the new administration. What new congressional Democrats may be particularly sympathetic to small business and franchising issues, do you think? And what are some of the opportunities for us to work with them?
Sure. I mean, I think we have some great new members. Focusing in on the House Democrats, there is a new member from Washington State. Her name is Marilyn Strickland. She is very impressive. She been mayor of Tacoma, and she also was president of the Seattle Area Chamber of Commerce. So she's a huge champion of small businesses, and I think will be very helpful. There is a new member in New York, Richie Torres. He calls himself a pragmatic progressive. So I did some meet and greets with him this past year when he was running. Very nice. I think very open, and I think he may be a good one to target. Also, I mean, you have some great members of the Small Business Committee that obviously are champions of small businesses across the U.S., but Dean Phillips is now going to be on the committee. He has been a huge champion of small businesses from Minnesota. He introduced the PPP Flexibility Act, which gave aid to small businesses. So he was already on your team, but this will be another champion on the committee for you.
Great, thank you. We do appreciate those members and look forward to the future with them. So Michael, we just asked Ashley about opportunities, and a lot of business people on the line may conduct SWOT analyses within their organizations. So now let's talk about the T's, let's talk about the threats. What concerns you most about the days to come as it relates to franchise businesses?
Well, Mike, you and I have had these discussions many times. One of my biggest concerns is that the franchisees, as I said, tend to be mom and pops. As a matter of fact, they're extraordinarily diverse. Women, minorities, people that are getting their slice of America and running their own businesses. But as small business owners, they oftentimes lack sufficient information in order to make good decisions and to be part of the conversation as to what might work for their businesses in a real bipartisan way. I think one of the things that the franchisors need to think about, especially with the threat on joint employer, is how can they continue to provide their franchisees with relevant information without going over the lines of the joint employment relationship. And that's quite a hefty challenge. But I definitely think that there are ways of doing that. And I don't think anybody should give up and completely run away, because I think the franchisor obviously is only as strong as its weakest franchisee. So that's one thing that I worry about. Another thing that I worry about is, where are they? You know, a SWOT analysis for one is obviously completely different for another. You know, if all of your restaurants are in North and South Dakota and Iowa, you don't have the same problems if all of your businesses are in California and New York. So I think one of the issues you have to consider is, where are my businesses? Because there's a lot of geography that impacts SWOT. So for example, in the San Francisco Bay Area, there's 27 different minimum wages. You know, how do you comply with something like that if you've got a bunch of franchisees that are operating there? How do you provide them with that level of support? That's obviously a very different analysis than, again, if, you know, all of your restaurants are in Alabama or Louisiana. There's one other issue that I think we should talk about that I feel very passionately about. There are many businesses that are telling us that despite the very high unemployment rate, I think it was close to 1 million people today, maybe it was 900,000, I forget the exact number, applying for unemployment. I didn't have a chance to look further on the long-term unemployed. But clearly we have a very significant problem, because even though the unemployment rate is, 6-7, the number of people that have left the labor market is very significant. And we've only regained approximately half of the jobs that we had with everybody employed, let's say, on or about last March 1. It's a very, very significant problem. And people have left the workforce. Businesses are saying, hey, I can't seem to find the qualified individuals. What do I do? We have a very, very significant problem in this country with respect to workforce preparation. We have a very, very serious problem with respect to upskilling individuals. I've been talking about this for 4 years with my nonprofit Emma Coalition, named after my precious granddaughter. And I think that businesses have a great opportunity here to engage in this discussion. We need a workforce for the 21st century, which is 1/5 gone. And we're at a significant disadvantage with many other countries in the world, including, for example, places like Singapore. I think there's an opportunity with this unemployment situation. There's an opportunity with WIOA. There's an opportunity for true bipartisanship to come together and to find better solutions with respect to upskilling and the preparation, not only of the workers today, but of the workers tomorrow. And I think that that would be something that, if I ever had an audience with them, I would urge the Secretary of Labor the nominee, Mr. Walsh, to really embrace and to engage in. Because I think that, again, is a bipartisan issue. And the president talks about unity. And if we can't get unity over making sure that our little granddaughters or children or what have you can have the kind of skills that they need to participate fully in this great country in our workforce, I don't think we can unite about anything. So that to me is kind of a no-brainer.
Great. Thank you, Michael. So Ashley, to bring you back in again, so prior to President Biden being sworn in yesterday, the House impeached President Trump for a second time last week. And so now it appears we're going to have another impeachment trial of President Trump in the Senate, even now that he's out of office. Do you believe that will still happen? What's the timeline on that, and how does that affect particularly the Senate's ability to pass legislation?
Right. I wish I had an easy yes or no. I do think it will happen. Timing, though, is still up in the air, like a lot of other things in DC. I think after the House passed, they impeached President Trump, former President Trump, on the 13th. Folks were thinking that Speaker Pelosi would send the articles over immediately. They have not been sent. She's now saying soon. Is soon tomorrow? Not sure. Or is it the next week? I mean, you have some people in House Dem leadership, like my former boss, Whip Clyburn, who thinks that they should hold the articles in the House until they can pass Biden's cabinet through the nominations over there. I don't know if the speaker agrees with that. So I think they could be sent as soon as tomorrow, maybe next week or the week after. I think she may be holding them, and this is, again, just my thoughts, until leaders McConnell and Schumer can figure out their power sharing agreement. Just there's so much still up in the air. I think she's kind of holding off for that. And then once she sends them over from the House side, that will trigger the impeachment trial, which should be shorter this time. Ideally, there's one article, so it should go much quicker than the last time. But again, timing's still up in the air until those decisions have been made. But yes, that could hold up legislation, right? I mean, even besides, the nominations of the cabinet, it could hold other legislation up as well. And I think folks do not want that to happen. They want this to be quick, but again, decisions need to be made before they can proceed.
Yep, great. Okay, we'll keep an eye on that. Michael, we've talked about DC so far, but you've mentioned California, and I wanted to ask about public policy and state governments. You live in California. Tell us what's happening there, as well as any other state capitals as it relates to franchising. And maybe while you're speaking, we'll put the slide on the screen with the minimum wage increases that are happening or just happened right around New Year's Day for everyone's reference. But Michael, tell us about state updates.
Yeah, I'll try to do this quickly. I think I've got 2 or 3 minutes. I could use 2 or 3 hours. One issue with respect to the minimum wage, if the minimum wage does go to 15 at the federal level, or some number even over a graduated period of time, much like what happened in Florida as a result of their proposition that was enacted, I think it's going to have a ripple effect, because the states and the cities within those states, or some of them, have been extremely active with respect to minimum wage. And so if the minimum wage at the federal level, let's say, is 15, I guarantee you that California will increase their minimum wage from 14 to 17 or some number like that. So I think there's a potential ripple effect. And we were talking to somebody earlier today, Michael, as you know, that also has a ripple effect within the entire workforce. So if you've got a manager, who's making, say $45,000 a year, $50,000 a year, and now suddenly there's these increases, and you throw in some overtime, you suddenly find out that the hourly worker is making as much, if not more, than the manager. So this tends to ripple, throughout the entire organization. And that's something to keep in mind with respect to costs. especially now as we're still trying to get out of the pandemic. You know, my own view about increasing the minimum wage, we're in the middle of the pandemic, it's probably not the brightest thing to do. So that's one issue. Another big issue, Michael, as you know, is this whole independent contractor issue in California, the whole AB5 problem, and the lawsuit that the IFA has filed in California, trying to get clarity that the so-called ABC test, which is also part of the PRO Act, which I'd mentioned earlier at the federal level, does not apply to franchising. A lot of issues with that. Because if you look at the ABC test and those components of the ABC test, literally, tremendous concern because the franchisor does have control over the franchisee and should under the Lanham Act in order to be able to comply, because that's the nature of franchising. So that lawsuit is extremely important, and we'll see how that plays out. Again, going from the SWOT analysis, where are you? If you're in New York City, or if you're in Chicago, you have to be, or Philadelphia, you got to be very concerned about predictive scheduling ordinances. The one in New York is impossible to comply with, absolutely impossible. The fines are astronomical, and they've continued even during the pandemic, making it that much worse, especially for the restaurant industry. We've got the new ordinance in New York City with respect to just cause, and you know, not being able to fire for just cause. It's not firing. It's all kinds of other elements of changing the nature of your overall workforce. Very, very significant problem. There's many people concerned, not as many people as before, because there aren't hardly any restaurants left in New York. And that's right now, you know, focused on, you know, especially fast food and the restaurateurs. But these things have a way of expanding. So those are the kinds of issues in the States. And I think going back a little bit to SWOT, if you're large enough to have a good government relations function, and you've got in-house folks, and maybe you've got outside lobbyists that are assisting you, you know, people like Ashley, take a real hard look at that SWOT. Take a real hard look at the states that you're in. You know, there's a reason why a lot of businesses are moving out of California. There's a reason why the unemployment rate in California is 15%. And there's a reason why we can't get any shots in the arm. I'm one of the ones that got one, thank heavens. Now I'm waiting for the second one. That's the good news. The bad news is I got them because I'm old. So you never quite know whether that's good or bad news. But you need to take a look at where you are. And I think increasingly companies are going to make that analysis, and they're going to put their operations or focus their operations in much more business-friendly states.
Great. Thank you, Michael. I think we've got time for one more question, and maybe give both of you a shot at this one, and it deals with the minimum wage. So the question is the $15 per hour minimum wage proposal likely to come quickly, and will that be an immediate increase to $15 or gradually phased in approach? Ashley, you want to start? Michael?
Sure, I'll start off. And I think Michael mentioned this earlier, President Biden has come out in support of it. So yes, it could be first few months. However, again, there are a lot of, you can't pass, yes, trying to take that out. Like they need to do several other things before they get to it. And just, I was there 2 years ago when we passed it, and then outside it was tough already. So they're going to have a lot of issues. And I mentioned the small margin, you know, they're going to have to, and I don't know if, you know, again, if they take up the old bill or they add it on to a COVID package, however they do it, they're going to have to work with the moderates and progressives to make sure it makes sense to everyone, just because things are so tight on it.
Great. Michael, is the bill likely to be phased in or all at once?
I think that, look, I really defer to Ashley. She's the lobbyist, and she understands the folks on the Hill, and is much closer to them than me. But it does seem to me that if you're going to be successful, given these very narrow margins, in doing something on minimum wage, that you're going to have to do a phased-in approach. I just don't know, even though in my personal opinion, just speaking for me, I think 725 is very, very low. But if you're going to go from 725 to 15, That's quite an increase. And again, I go back to what happened in Florida with their initiative, where I forget what year they get to 15, 2, 3, 4 years from now. Sorry, I don't remember the exact numbers, but something like that phases it, I think would have to be necessary, Ashley, in order to get that kind of bipartisan agreement in order to pass it. But that's just my personal view, but I defer to the expert.
No, I totally agree with you. Again, just from being part of the conversations last time, I would imagine that a phase-in would have to come into play to actually get it passed.
Great. I do believe the Florida bill is a 5-step increase up to $15, and the House passed $15 bill from 2 years ago actually had 7 increases over 6 years to get to $15. So that was also phased in. So we'll see if it looks the same, but we're very grateful to both Michael Latito and Ashley Palmer for their time. That's all the time we have today, folks. We hope you enjoyed this program. Our thanks also to Brock Blake and Lendio. Just a reminder that this recording will be on the community.franchise.org webpage. And on this last slide, we just encourage everyone, as you hear about all these critical issues facing the franchise business format, we really want everybody in the franchising community a part of FAN, our Franchise Action Network, our advocacy army of franchise business owners across the country. All you have to do is text FAN to 25886 as you see on your screen. And we at the IFA continue to stand with you. And a reminder also to register for the 2021 IFA convention at franchise.org/convention, franchise.org/convention. Our first remarkable virtual conference convention that will take place next week. And today is the last day to register for an early bird rate. So thank you again, Ashley and Michael, for your time and your expertise. Thank you everyone again for participating. Have a great rest of your day and new year, and stay safe.